On my parents' anniversary, I handed them a mysterious box. To my surprise, my mom brushed it off, calling me a freeloader who couldn't take care of myself. My dad chimed in. "We don't need your cheap gift, just take it and leave." I couldn't help but laugh as I revealed what was inside. Now they won't stop calling me a beggar, I thought. I was only 13 when everything in my life changed forever. That morning began like any other. My dad, a site manager at a construction company, gave me a kiss and left for work. My mom barely glanced up from her phone as he walked out the door. I remember thinking how odd it was. Once they had been so affectionate with each other. My name is Betty Thomas, and that was the last time I saw my dad alive. That same afternoon, he collapsed at work from a massive heart attack. In math class, the principal summoned me to her office, where my mom was already waiting, her makeup still flawless despite the tragedy. "Your father's gone, Betty," she said so calmly it felt off. I burst into tears, but my mom simply patted my back as if nothing mattered. Later that evening, I overheard her talking to her friend Laura through our thin walls. "Actually, Laura, this might be for the best," she said softly but clearly. "Being a widow is better than a divorce, and I get to keep everything without lawyers." Then she laughed, a laugh that chilled me. I know, she continued. "I'll just act the grieving widow at the funeral. I've already picked out the perfect black dress." I sat on the stairs, hand over my mouth to stifle my scream. My dad's sister, Aunt Helen, was the only one who seemed to see the truth behind it all, while everyone else offered condolences to my heartbroken mother. At the funeral, Aunt Helen just shook her head. She'd always known how poorly Mom treated Dad. It wasn't long before things changed. Just 4 months later, Mom began inviting a man named Peter Fernandez over for dinner. He had 2 children from a previous marriage, Adam, 12, and Joyce, 11. Mom started cooking elaborate meals, something she never did for Dad. One evening, with an overly sweet tone, Mom said, "Betty, sweetheart, Peter and I have something to tell you." I already knew what was coming from the way they sat together on the couch, holding hands while Mom beamed like a teenager. It was clear they were planning a wedding. "Isn't it wonderful?" Mom chirped. "You'll have a new father and siblings." I forced a smile even as my stomach churned. "Great, Mom. Congratulations," I muttered. Peter offered a smile too, but it didn't feel genuine. Although Adam and Joyce acted thrilled to have a new sister, I couldn't ignore the way they looked at me, as if I were worthless like dirt on the soles of their expensive shoes. That night, I called Aunt Helen and cried for hours. She listened without interrupting, then said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes the family you choose is more important than the one you're born into." Her words resonated with me. Adam and Joyce moved in a week after their parents' honeymoon. They quickly claimed the best rooms, and even my playroom turned into Joyce's art studio. When I tried to speak up, Mom simply said, "Don't be selfish, Betty. We need to make them feel welcome." After marrying Peter, Mom transformed completely. She spent hours helping Joyce with homework and driving Adam to soccer practice, while I ate dinner alone in my room. The way she looked at Peter was as if he were the greatest man alive, something I'd never seen with Dad. "Adam needs new soccer shoes," she'd say, "or Joyce will take art classes this summer." There was always money for their needs, but whenever I asked for something small like school supplies, she would sigh or roll her eyes, making me feel like I was asking for too much. So I stopped asking altogether. They began taking trips, simple weekend getaways or camping in state parks, but I was never invited. "You'll be bored," Mom would say without even glancing at me as she packed snacks for Adam and Joyce. "Besides, someone needs to feed the cat." So I stayed behind with Aunt Helen, whose little cottage felt more like home than my own house ever did. She never had kids of her own but treated me as the daughter she always wanted. "This isn't right, Betty," she'd say as I unpacked yet another overnight bag. A mother shouldn't have favorites, I thought, but I pretended it didn't hurt. "At least I have you and Helen," I'd say. When I was 17, I cautiously brought up college during dinner. I'd been browsing schools online, dreaming of studying business management. "Mom," I began when everyone seemed happy, "I want to talk about college applications." Instantly, Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "College, Betty? We can't afford that. We need to think about Adam and Joyce's education." Adam smirked across the table, and Joyce's smile was proud and obvious. Peter kept eating, as if the conversation didn't concern him. Later that night, I confronted Mom in the kitchen. "What about Dad's money?" I asked. "He had life insurance and saved for years." Her face hardened. "I've used that money to take care of you for the past 5 years. She snapped. "Food, clothes, a roof over your head, did you think that was free? Don't act like you deserve everything." I stood there, stunned. I knew she was lying. Dad had worked so hard to secure my future, And now all that money was gone, spent on her new perfect family while I was left behind. That weekend, I went to Aunt Helen's house, my eyes still brimming with tears. We sat at her kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee in the air. As I poured out everything, how Mom crushed my college dreams and how unfair it all felt. Aunt Helen listened quietly, then went into her study. I heard her rummaging through drawers before she returned with a thick envelope. "Your father came to see me 3 weeks before he died," she said, placing the envelope on the table. "He was worried, as if he sensed something terrible might happen. He gave me this and made me promise to keep it safe until you were ready for college." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a bank statement showing a sizable savings account in my name, with Aunt Helen listed as trustee. Dad had been secretly saving money just for me. "Your mom's been acting strange," Aunt Helen murmured softly. "Your dad wanted to secure your future no matter what. The money has been growing all these years." I cried again, this time out of gratitude and love. Even though Dad was gone, he still protected me. "We can't tell your mom about this," Aunt Helen insisted, and I nodded, wiping my eyes. Over the next 3 years, I focused on school and kept my college plans secret. Adam and Joyce never missed an opportunity to mock me about my future. "Hey Betty," Adam would say in the hallway with a grin. "The diner downtown needs a dishwasher. Maybe if you're lucky, they'll let you clean tables too," Joyce would add, laughing as if it were the best joke ever. I just kept quiet, and my silence seemed only to irritate them. Then came graduation day. Barely had I removed my cap and gown when Mom and Peter called me into the living room for a serious talk. They sat on the couch like judges ready to deliver a verdict, and I stood there waiting. "Betty," Peter said firmly, "you're 19 now. We've been more than generous, but you need to understand you can't live here forever. It's time to get a job and take care of yourself." I smiled calmly. "I understand completely. I'll be out by next week." They looked surprised, apparently expecting tears or an argument. Mom opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. "Well, good," Peter said. It was clear they didn't want to ask where I'd go or how I'd manage. They were just relieved I didn't fight back. Moving day arrived faster than I imagined. I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. It wasn't much, but somehow I'd been preparing for this moment all along. At exactly 10 a.m., Aunt Helen pulled up in her blue Honda. I watched her from my bedroom window, hoping someone from home would come out to say goodbye, but no one did. Even though I saw curtains move in Joyce's room. As we drove away, I watched my childhood home shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared completely. I didn't cry. With every mile I felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. That house had been full of fake smiles and empty love, and I was finally free. That summer, I worked at the Sunshine Cafe, serving coffee and sandwiches to kind customers who always tipped well. The owner, Mrs. Walter, was sweet and even let me work extra hours so I could save money for college. In September, I boarded a plane and headed for West Virginia University, 2 states away from everything I'd known. I enrolled in the business management program. It was challenging, but I gave it my all. My roommate Jacqueline became my first true friend since middle school. At first, she didn't know much about my past, but when she eventually heard my full story, she just hugged me and said, "Their loss, girl. It's their loss." Mom's Instagram became my only window into the life I left behind. There, they posted photos of Adam's soccer games, Joyce's art shows, and family beach vacations, all with captions that sounded as fake as advertisements. I wasn't mentioned, not even once. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. Instead, I found solace at Aunt Helen's house, where we cooked together, watched old movies, and created our own little traditions. Those moments meant more to me than any forced family dinner ever could. Sometimes, Aunt Helen would catch me staring at Mom's social media and gently take my phone. "Don't do this to yourself, Betty. You're writing your own story now." And she was right, I was. I eventually graduated with honors and secured job offers thanks to my grades and internships. Jacqueline's dad, Mr. Eric, who owned a large marketing company, noticed my work during a school project. "We need smart people like you," he said during my interview, praising my professors. I started as a junior analyst, but I didn't stop there. I worked late, took on extra tasks, and continued studying the market. Every step of the way, I was proving that despite all the setbacks, I was in control of my own future. In my free time, I followed trends, and within 6 years, I was promoted twice and saved enough for a down payment on my own apartment. The day I signed the papers, I stood in my empty living room with the keys in hand and finally let my tears flow. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pride, joy, and the realization that I had made it on my own. Then, something incredible happened. About 8 years after starting at the company, Mr. Eric called me into his office. "We're creating a new position," he said as he handed me a folder. Senior Director of Strategic Development. The board and I agree you're the perfect fit. I almost gasped when I saw the salary. It was more money than I ever imagined, especially at my age. I never felt the need to brag online. Sure, I had social media, but I mostly posted pictures of pretty sunsets or cozy coffee shops. Aunt Helen was the only one who knew about my promotions, my new apartment, or even the black Mercedes I bought to celebrate my new director role. You've earned every bit of it, she always said with pride when I told her about my achievements. Meanwhile, Adam and Joyce's social media was filled with mundane posts. Adam often posted photos next to his old Hyundai Elantra with captions like, "Living the dream, blessed luxury life." And Joyce would share mall selfies, tagging designer brands she clearly couldn't afford. One post had me laughing. Adam stood proudly beside his car at a local car show with the caption, "When hard work pays off. Success entrepreneur." I read it while sitting in my Mercedes-AMG, worth more than Adam made in a year. But I never felt the urge to show off or prove anything to anyone. Then one Thursday morning, a message popped up on my Instagram that changed everything. "Betty, it's your mother. My 50th birthday is next month, and I'm hosting a party at an expensive restaurant called LeBlanc. You've probably never heard of it. I expect you to be there. It's on the 16th at 8 p.m. sharp. Don't embarrass me." I stared at the screen, reading the message repeatedly. After 13 years of silence, this was how she chose to reach out. "No, how are you?" No kindness, just a cold command with a sting of insult. I almost deleted it, but something made me curious about how it would all play out. That same evening, I called Mr. Eric and asked for a week off from work. While sipping tea in Aunt Helen's warm kitchen, she asked, "What are you planning to give her?" I smiled and showed her the confirmation email on my phone. A luxury vacation package to Australia. 3 weeks at a 7-star resort, first-class flights included, all worth around $20,000. Aunt Helen's eyes widened. "Betty, that's way too much. She doesn't deserve it." "Oh, I know she doesn't," I laughed. "But can you imagine her reaction when she finds out what she gave up? The daughter she pushed aside turned out more successful than she ever imagined. I just want to see the look on her face when she realizes how wrong she was about me." Aunt Helen chuckled and shook her head. "You're a little bit wicked." "I love it," I replied. On the evening of Mom's birthday, I wore a simple yet elegant Chanel dress. It looked classy, and its price was enough to buy 10 of the flashy outfits I'd seen that night. I took a taxi to the restaurant, fully aware it would reinforce their false ideas about my life. LeBlanc turned out exactly as I expected. A place that tried too hard to seem expensive with frozen seafood and dessert sprinkled with gold flakes. I'd attended business dinners at places so luxurious that LeBlanc looked more like a diner in comparison. A hostess led me to a private room where the party was already in full swing. Mom sat at the head of the table in a sparkly sequin dress that shimmered under the chandelier, with Peter at her side and Adam and Joyce on either side, acting like royalty. The table was filled with family I hadn't seen in over 11 years. Aunt Laura, who used to pinch my cheeks too hard, Cousin Christina, who never stopped bragging about her kids, and several other familiar faces. Mom glanced at me for a brief moment before offering a fake smile. "Oh, Betty, you actually came. You could have dressed up a little more for the occasion." I quietly took a seat at the far end of the table and observed. Aunt Laura proudly presented Mom with a set of scented candles from a cute little mall shop, and Mom acted as if they were made of gold. Cousin Christina gave her a spa gift card, and Mom squealed with delight. One gift led to another. A cookbook, a vase, a basket of bath goodies. Each one receiving loud thanks from Mom. Then it was Adam and Joyce's turn. They stood together, grinning as if they just won a prize. "Mom," Adam began. It still felt strange hearing him call her that. "Joyce and I saved up to get you something really special." Joyce pulled out her phone and showed a photo. A 75-inch smart TV, already delivered and set up in the living room. Overcome, Mom started crying and hugged them both. "My wonderful, generous children. I can't believe you saved for so long." Finally, everyone's eyes turned to me. I reached into my purse and produced a small, simply wrapped box. Mom's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of disdain. "What is this supposed to be?" she snapped. "Just open it and see," I said quietly. But she refused to open it, growing angrier by the second. "This is exactly what I expected from you," she seethed. "You show up in that plain dress, the only decent thing you own. You take a taxi because you can't afford a car, and now this tiny box? What could possibly be in there? A gift card to McDonald's." She hurled the box back at me, and it slid across the table, scratching the surface. Adam and Joyce snickered behind their hands. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, while others seemed to enjoy the drama. Peter just continued eating his dessert as if nothing was happening. I calmly picked up the box and brushed off some crumbs from the tablecloth that had clung to its wrapping. The room fell silent, everyone waiting to see what I would do next. You know what's funny, Mom? I said steadily. Inside this little box is a receipt for a luxury vacation to Australia. First-class flights. A 7-star resort, everything included. It's worth $20,000. Mom's face went pale. Joyce dropped her fork with a loud clatter. That's not possible, Mom stuttered. You can't afford something like that. You're lying. I couldn't help but laugh a little. You'd know what I can afford if you'd ever cared about my life in the past 13 years. Since you didn't keep me updated, let me remind you. I'm a senior director at Eric Marketing Group. I own my apartment in the city, and that taxi you mocked? I took it because I didn't want to leave my Mercedes parked around here. Adam's mouth hung open and Joyce's smile faded. And if you think I'm a failure, I continued, slipping the box back into my purse, then clearly you've got it all wrong. Enjoy the TV. I've heard the screen is almost as good as the one in my home theater. I stood up and walked out with my head held high, the sound of my heels echoing in the silent room. No one spoke a word. The restaurant host called a taxi for me, and I headed straight to Aunt Helen's house. She was already waiting with 2 cups of tea on the coffee table. I told her everything. Some people never change, she sighed. Your mother has always cared more about appearances than about being a good person. While we talked, my phone rang with an unknown number. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Mom. Betty, sweetheart, she said in an overly sweet tone. I had no idea how she got my number. I've been thinking about what happened. Have you? She asked. Yes, I replied calmly. I realize I may have spoken too soon. If you're still willing to give me that gift, I'd love to accept it. We could have a fresh start. I want to be in your life again. We're family. No, I said firmly. I understand everything now. We're not really family. We're just people who share the same DNA. You didn't want to fix anything. You just want that vacation. I hung up. Even after I left town, Mom kept calling from different numbers. Her cell, the house phone, even Peter's phone. When she saw I wasn't answering, she sent message after message. Betty, please call me back. We need to talk. She kept texting, asking for help with Adam, Joyce, and even the house repairs. Each message was more obvious than the last. A mix of guilt, flattery, manipulation, and threats. It was like watching someone at a casino desperately trying to win back what they lost. But what Mom lost wasn't money, it was me, her daughter. I read each message like a work report, noticing the patterns. I'm your mother. How can you ignore me? You've become so successful. Family should help family. I'll tell everyone how you abandoned me. A week after I got back, Aunt Helen called. Your mom's been calling nonstop, she said. She even showed up at my house today demanding your address. What did you say? I asked, though I already knew. I told her to leave or I'd call the police, Aunt Helen replied with a laugh. You should have seen her face. She kept insisting she had a right to know where her daughter lives, but I reminded her she lost that right long ago. I pictured Mom standing on Aunt Helen's porch in one of her fancy outfits, trying to force her way in. It was the same behavior I'd seen my whole life, and now it was clear for what it was. She didn't take it well, Aunt Helen continued. She started yelling, saying we were both ungrateful for everything she sacrificed for you. I think the whole neighborhood heard her shouting. When she realized I wasn't going to help, Mom stormed off. But be careful, Betty, Aunt Helen warned. She seemed desperate. I had already blocked her on everything: social media, phone, email. And I told security at work not to let her in if she ever showed up. After we hung up, I walked around my apartment, admiring everything I'd worked so hard for. The modern furniture I picked out, the paintings on the walls, the beautiful city view outside my window. Every part of it was the result of my own hard work. Then I thought about Mom's messages. Now that she knew I had money, she suddenly wanted to be a part of my life. In the end, it was almost funny. She had discarded our relationship just to appear perfect, and now she wanted back in just to seem connected to someone successful. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that family isn't about blood or legal ties. It's about love, support, and being there for each other through good times and bad. I had that with Aunt Helen. The next morning, I called the travel agency and changed the name on the Australia vacation package. It was now under Helen Thomas. When I told Aunt Helen, she tried to protest, but I smiled and said, "You deserve this more than she ever did. You've been more of a mother to me than she ever was." Aunt Helen hugged me tightly, and for the first time in many years, I truly felt I was right where I belonged.